Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Still no questions. We must be really very good at leaving our intellects at the doors along with our shoes. I'm impressed. Let me encourage you again to do that tonight. Don't let your intellect get involved. Your intellect and human consciousness will want to argue with everything that's being said because what's being said is contrary to what human consciousness believes. All of spiritual truth is almost exactly the opposite of the material and mental truths. So try to keep your intellect uninvolved and try to keep judgment uninvolved and just be in a receptive state. We'll all be in a receptive state and hear what's said, and then we can go back to the audio files subsequently and take notes or do whatever our minds want to do. Because there's a lot of useful information that's being given in these talks so far, but far more important than the information is the consciousness that it's pointing at. It's not the Zen master's hand, it's the moon that he's pointing at, so letting it in is the most important thing. I think we'll start once again with the basic principle of the mystical consciousness or spiritual consciousness, which is that all there is consciousness. And another way of saying that is that all there is what is. Another word for consciousness is God. All there is God. Even in the big book in AA, it says either God is everything or God is nothing, and the answer is everything. Or we can say all there is spirit. The word spirit is the same word as consciousness. When we talk about spiritual beings, we're talking about beings in consciousness. Or awareness is another good word. All there is awareness. Robert speaks of choiceless, effortless, pure awareness as the absolute state from which everything sprang. The Christian Church agrees that all there is God. They acknowledge that God is omnipresent, and omnipresent means everywhere, and that means that there's no room for anything else. Of course, then the Christian Church introduces a devil as a force opposed to God, and a few other things like that, so they don't stick tight to their own doctrine, but nonetheless the basic truth is there, the omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. So all there is consciousness. And consciousness is expressed. One consciousness. All there is one consciousness which is expressed, which has expressed itself as what we see as creation. It has expressed itself in infinite variety and variation. But it's not like a potter making a pot out of clay and setting it over there, and now we got the potter and we got the clay pot and we got the leftover clay. It's not like that at all, because all there is consciousness. So what we have is an expression created by consciousness, out of consciousness, and expressed within consciousness. Robert Adams talks about going to a movie and seeing the scene on the screen on the movie, and we go in there and we see all the pictures and we get all caught up in the action and such like, and get into the story, and we may laugh or cry or get afraid or whatever. But at any point, if we walked up to the screen or tried to grab hold of one of the figures on the screen, we'd be grabbing screen. The reality of the movie is just colored lights changing on a screen. And he used that as an indication of consciousness. The screen is consciousness, and the movie is the creation. So the true nature of the entire creation is just consciousness, and the creation is superimposed on consciousness, as the movie is superimposed on the screen. And of course, whatever is superimposed on the screen has absolutely no effect on the screen, nor does this creation have any effect on consciousness. Consciousness is constant and unchanging and eternal, and all of this Leelaa is taking place superimposed on consciousness. And part of consciousness's expression is individual you and you and you and me. They're all expressions of consciousness. But consciousness is one, so we're all expressions of the one consciousness. Consciousness does not express itself as a bunch of independent things. Consciousness expressed itself as all of the independent things which are variations and forms within itself. So we tend to think that we're independent, that we have a body, but actually we are an expression of the one body. And we tend to think that we all have, that I have my life and you have your life and you have your life, but actually we all have an expression of the one life. There's only one life expressing in all of us. Like if you have a tree with a bunch of branches on it, the life of all the branches is the life of the tree. And the blossoms on some branches are still the same life of the tree, just expressed differently, but it's all the one life of the tree. And in the same way, there's one life that is expressed as each of us and all of us. So my life is your life. It's not a separate life. I don't need to take care of my life at the expense of your life, because that's impossible. There's only the one life expressed. And there's the one consciousness expressed, so my consciousness is your consciousness. And my mind is your mind. There's only one mind. We tend to think of our own mind. I have my mind and you have your mind. But that's not the case. There's one mind expressed differently for different people. So this is a fundamental truth about all of creation. And the nature of everything in creation, in other words, the nature of all the expressions, is the nature of consciousness. Just like the true nature of everything in the movie is screen and colored lights. The true nature is not bad guys and good guys and beautiful sunsets and airplanes and stuff like that. The true nature of everything, when you're looking at a movie, the true nature of everything in that movie is lights on a screen. So the true nature of everything in consciousness is consciousness. It's eternal in the sense of outside of time. There's no time in consciousness itself. Consciousness itself does not experience time. Time is in a bubble within mind, within consciousness. We'll get there in a minute. But there's really no time in consciousness, in God, in spirit. And there's no space in God, in time, in spirit. And so it immediately becomes absolutely inconceivable what there is in God, because for us to conceive of something, we need time and space to see it and conceive of it. We need things to take up space before we can think about them and to elapse over time. And it's impossible for us to think about something outside of time and space which contains space and time, because even the word contains implies that there's space to contain it in. So immediately we can't talk about, and we can't use our intellect or our mind or our understanding or our reason to understand what the true nature of what is. But since it's eternal outside of time, unchanging, it certainly is the words perfect harmony. Nothing can possibly go wrong in something where there's no time, and perfection arises. Eternal means not a long time stretch, but eternal means now, forever, infinitely now outside of time, now when you're not using your intellect and thinking of time. And it has this creation that it's created, all of which is this spiritual creation, all of which is created in consciousness, out of consciousness, all of which is incorporeal, all of which has no conditions, because conditions like good and bad or tall or short or things like that require something, material, space-time, to be a condition of. So we have this amazing, indescribable isness that is what the Christian church would refer to as the Godhead, before there was individuality. And since if that was all there was, there would be no one here and no class and nothing like that, why creation included as an aspect of itself mind. I guess it takes mind to be conscious of the expression, or it may take mind to express in, I don't know which for sure, but in any event, to be conscious of the expression, of all the expressions, requires time and space. And what we experience is mind, and it's mind that we need to understand the nature of, to some extent, in order to see what's really going on. My friend Debbie Bayer once taught a class to Barbara Mull's students, and it was a kid class, and she called the class Moron Kid. And everybody heard the word moron as one word and dropped the E. And I thought about that this morning, so I think we should call this talk Moron Mind. Because without the E or with the E, suit yourself, mind is not intelligent. God is intelligent. God is omniscience. God is all intelligence, or what is the intelligence. Mind does not have intelligence. Mind is really just an instrument. And what mind does is it takes the content of the consciousness which is presented to it, and it forms it. Mind forms consciousness. It expresses, it makes the expression. It forms concepts of the consciousness that's driving it, so to speak, as thoughts, and it also expresses what's driving it as matter. And all the various forms of matter. So all the things that we think of as being in mind are expressions within mind by mind, formations in mind by mind of the consciousness that's driving it. And mind really is an instrument, and it is an aspect of consciousness, so that it can be an instrument for consciousness to express its creation and its ideas. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you want to have it, mind will also create any other set of consciousness and ideas that are presented to it. So it forms the content of our consciousness as easily as it forms the content of the Creator's consciousness. Mind just forms. Mind itself is unconditioned. It has no conditions at all. It forms just exactly what's given to it. Robert's example is like a freshly plowed field in a farmyard. And you go out there and you poke seeds into the ground, and it grows whatever seed you plant in the ground. It doesn't care what you plant. If you plant corn, it grows corn, and if you plant poison, it grows poison. You know, and poison. If you plant poison ivy seeds, it'll grow that. The soil is absolutely uninterested in what you plant. Mind is the same way. Mind is more on mind. Mind forms whatever is given it to form, and it is unconditioned itself, and it imposes no conditions on what it forms. The conditions are imposed subsequently by whatever is viewing the forms. And I presume that when God or consciousness or whatever is experiencing the forms that God formed, it doesn't impose conditions on that either, and there's no judgment of good or bad or anything like that in that whole thing. But what we're seeing is forms colored by our conditioning. What else can we say about mind? There's only one mind. I think that's all we need to say about it right now. It's this instrument that, well, from our viewpoint, it should be used as an avenue of awareness rather than as a power tool. It's available to those of us in the human condition as an avenue of awareness to become aware of what is, of what the creation is, of what is of what is expressing itself as. And it can be used as such, and that's what makes sense as its intent from our viewpoint. It can also be used, or we can attempt to use it, as a power. We talked about material and mental power as well as spiritual, which is a non-power state, but we can use mind as a tool for mental power, and that has a lot to do with some of the metaphysical churches and with mental healings, and it also has a lot to do with some of the primitive cultures that understood the power of mind. I'm thinking of voodoo. I'm thinking of the Aborigines that could point a person to death. I'm thinking of the Hawaiians before the missionaries got there that had good and bad kahunas. There were a lot of primitive peoples that understood the power of mind much more than we do today, typically. So mind can be used that way. Mind is, like the soil, willing to form anything that it's given to form, and so when it's driven by human consciousness, it appears to be a tool of creation for us human beings. And let me say that that's a lie, that mind does not create, it forms, and there's a real difference in those. Creation is what God did, what consciousness did. Consciousness expressed itself, and that is the creation. And the creation is already done, and it's already complete, and it's finished, and it was at the beginning, whatever that means, because it all happened outside of time, and it is within the time, within mind, that we're seeing the expression of that, or can see the expression of that. But mind is just forming a picture of it, like we have a picture of a scene on a movie screen. Mind is just forming a picture of whatever the creation is, or it's forming a picture of whatever the human consciousness is driving it with. It just forms a picture, and the picture has no reality at all outside of mind, or in the sense that the creation, that God's creation has. I'm sort of torn here because I don't want to use the word God's creation, because many of us will tend to think in terms of an anthropomorphical God creating things. But I do want to say God's creation because that has a better ring to most people than what is His creation. So I'm torn here, but when I say God, I mean what is. Sometimes it just rings better. In any event, creation, as I say, is done. It is outside of time. There's no sense of anything being created now. Whatever is ever going to be created already was created and is created, and none of that is going on because there's no time there. Our view of it is within time, and let's go one step further. Our view of creation, or our view of the content of our own consciousness, that is just concepts that we as human beings are having. Well, I guess this is the point to talk about the human condition, so let's go there next. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And spiritual being means an eternal, infinite being whose nature is consciousness and eternality and harmony and perfection and bliss and joy and things like that. And it also means an incorporeal being, because spirit is incorporeal. It means a non-material being, in other words. That's what spiritual being implies. And having a human experience means within mind, inside of mind, we're having an experience inside of mind, and we're operating from a level of consciousness which is primarily material and to some extent mental. Different people at different levels. The story of the unfoldment of creation that we see over time within this bubble called mind, this bubble of time and space, is one of an unfoldment of consciousness from ignorance to the transcendental or mystical or super or spiritual consciousness. And the beginning level of that consciousness is material, very material, and it grows into the level of mental consciousness, and it grows into the level of spiritual consciousness. And this all takes place in mind, and it is this experience of growing our consciousness, of raising the level of our consciousness, that we call the human experience. Let's look at the dreams that we have every night. We're asleep in our bed and a dream happens. And during that dream, the dream takes place in some space. There's an environment in which the dream takes place. It might be a room in which some people are sitting around you and several people. It might be a coffee shop, like Jay's coffee shop. And you might dream that you're at the coffee shop and you're having coffee with several people, and you can wrap your hand on the table and feel the hardness of the table, and you can taste and smell the coffee, and you can hear the jazz that's playing in the background. And it's taking place in this room that's in your consciousness, and you might be having coffee for an hour with people, and the dream appears to have taken an hour of elapsed time. And then you wake up, and if they had electrocardiogram on your brain while that was happening, the elapsed time of the brain activity would have been 1 or 2 seconds. So here's a real good, and when you wake up, of course, Jay's coffee shop disappeared. Poof, no more coffee shop. Sorry, Jay. But there's a real clear picture of the ability of consciousness, your individual consciousness, to create a bubble of time and space. Okay? That's what happened. And the time never existed from this viewpoint, and the space never existed from anybody's viewpoint. And the other interesting thing is that you were identified completely with that concept of yourself that you had in the dream. And you were seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and touching everything in the dream through the senses of that image of you in the dream that you were identified with. That image of you that never existed was the image that you were seeing and hearing and smelling through. Okay? You were identified with this being in the dream, and you were seeing and hearing through its senses. Your senses, you the dreamer, your eyes are closed, and there's no sound, there's no music playing in your room, and there's no coffee smell, and there's none of that's happening to the one who's asleep. You're seeing it through the senses of the one that you're identified with in the dream. Okay? This is a pretty good picture of what's happening to us right now in this time and space mind bubble. In fact, we're the spiritual being that is outside of this, outside of the time and outside of the space. This creation of time and space is within us, just like your consciousness or subconsciousness demonstrates on a nightly basis that it can do. And we're mostly identified with the body in the dream, in this Maya, in this Leelaa, in this illusion. We're identified with this body and mind in this illusion, and we're seeing through the senses of this body-mind within this illusion. And the senses that we're seeing through and hearing through and touching through and saying this is real, I can feel it, those senses are not the senses of the spiritual being that we really are. They're the senses of this illusory being that we're identified with within this dream, exactly as it happens in your dream at night. And I defy any of you to prove that that's not what's happening to you right now. Because whatever you come up with, I will point out that you could have dreamed that exact thing. So, we're having this human experience of growing from ignorance in consciousness to hopefully transcendental consciousness where we wake up. It's interesting, I think I've said it before, but it's interesting that Buddha's expression after he had the experience under the Bodhi tree is, I am awake. He woke up. And Robert also says, I am awake. And he assures everybody that's around him that when you wake up from this dream, he's talking in a satsang, he says, when you wake up from this dream, there will be no doubt in your mind that you have woken up. Exactly as when you wake up from your dream at night, when you wake up from the dream, there is no doubt in your mind that that was a dream and that you're awake now. And Robert guarantees that when you wake up from this dream, it will be as clear to you that that was a dream and that you're awake now. And that was the awakening, the enlightenment that Gautama the Buddha had. No question about it. So, we're in this state of human consciousness, and we're having this human experience, and as part of having this human experience, we're linked up with this thing that I call human consciousness, although it's not really consciousness, it's just a set of beliefs within the one mind and the one consciousness, which those of us having this human experience seem to have signed up for and seem to believe. Human consciousness, human belief, universal human belief, is all the beliefs that have conditioned us since our birth and before. They're all the stuff that continues to condition us, all the beliefs that all of humanity holds. These are the beliefs that there are 6 billion of us believing and radiating into this one mind and this one consciousness. We're radiating our beliefs. And these are all the materialistic beliefs and a few of the mental beliefs, but of the 6.3 billion, why, the great majority of them are very materialistic and are believing material beliefs, and in the material consciousness there's a small finite amount and there's way too many of us and they're all better than I am and I've got to really get out there and get mine, and I better get mine before you get yours because there's not enough, and I've got to take care of myself, and the whole Darwinian thing is survival of the fittest, so I'd better be the fittest, and all that nonsense, which is all fear-based. You've heard me say, many of you, that every action that is based in human consciousness is based in fear. And that's what human belief, universal human belief is. It's a cauldron of fears that we have that are based on the false belief that we're separate, and the fact, if that false belief were true, of how inadequate we are at surviving. If we truly were separate and on our own and had to do it by ourselves, we would not be survivors. So all of human consciousness is just fundamentally fear-based. And we're all linked up to that because we're conditioned to everyone. Our parents, while we were in the womb, were afraid that we weren't going to be whole and healthy. and were generating fear, or they were afraid we were going to be sickly, or when we came out they were afraid that somebody would give us a cold or that we'd get this or that. And everybody's so afraid of taking care of us, and they're afraid of all sorts of things. And then we get taught a lot more fears and inadequacies by the people at school and the people we work with and the people at church and the church dogmas that we subscribe to, and on and on. There are all these people who are telling us that we're separate from God and on our own, and with any luck at all we'll have a better experience in the next life, but right now well, we probably better confess or something, or whatever it is that the particular dogma that we were brought up in subscribes to. And the conditioning goes on through advertising media and through television and through sitcoms and through movies and through books, and we just have no idea of the depth to which we're conditioned to believe that we are this body and this individual body and this individual mind, separate and apart from everybody else and on my own. It's just the incredible conditioning. It's amazing that anyone ever gets out of it. It's so deep and so continually being reapplied subliminally, because there are 6 billion people out there believing it and radiating it at us. And that belief, our experience is what it is. Obviously, everything we experience is what's in our own individual consciousness, so to speak. There's really only one consciousness, but we seem to have this amount of consciousness right now in this human experience, which reflects how far we've gotten on this path of growing from ignorance to transcendental. And everything that we experience is within our consciousness. We don't experience everything that's in our consciousness. Very carefully, we only notice the things that we have a reaction to or have a response to. Joel talks about walking down a street, and you might be walking with your girlfriend who sees every jewelry store, and you don't even notice them, and you see every toy store, motorcycle shop or electronic store, and she doesn't even notice them, because we only see those things which we respond to. And in the same way, we respond to various things in this cauldron of human consciousness, beliefs and fears, based on our particular level of consciousness at the moment and who we are and what life we're leading, whether we're male or female, and American or English or African or what have you, and Christian or Jewish or Muslim or what have you. We have all this conditioning that's been given to us, and based on that we respond to various beliefs in human consciousness. But nonetheless, we're responding to and picking up beliefs that are all these fear-based beliefs, and these are the beliefs that we are made up of at this moment. And these are the things we are feeding to that poor little innocent moron mind instrument, which is forming it for us. Okay? Ouch. So that's the real bottom line to what appears to be. And we talked about it some last week, but now we've gone a lot deeper into it. It is really not true that there are any powers out there of good or evil which are manipulating us or causing anything to happen to us at all. All there is the effect of our consciousness being formed as our experience, literally. There is nothing out there but effect. Just really difficult. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's really difficult to get at the level that will make a change in your life. But there is nothing out there but effect. The effect of your consciousness being formed within mind. Just as in a dream, there is nothing in the dream but the effect of the content of, in this case, presumably the subconsciousness of the dreamer. But it's all effect. It's all bubble. It's all illusion. It's all Maya. It's all Leelaa. And to the extent that we're ignorant about this truth, and to the extent that we have an ego that says we need to be self-sufficient, and to the extent that we're attracted by things, these effects, or that we have an aversion to these effects, or to the extent that we're afraid of death, to go back to Patanjali's 5 sources of suffering, to the extent that any of these are true for us, we're suffering. To the extent that any of these are in our mind and our belief, we're suffering. And of course, the nature of all of this stuff is that it changes, because human consciousness is so variable, and the stuff that's not really built into us, usually we're just willing vehicles for this universal human belief to express itself through. Universal human belief believes in disease, and so those of us who are particularly sensitive to flu believe we'll get flu and those of us who are really afraid of cancer we get cancer, and we pick up on those beliefs in human consciousness that strike a chord within us, usually a fearful chord, and these are the things we form. But of course, all of this stuff changes so that we can get changed to where we're healthy, and then health changes back to sickness, and war changes to peace, but peace changes to war, and we can go out there and we can do all sorts of things in this bubble trying to change the effect. We can take medicine to solve the disease. Robert talks about, so we have a tumor on our arm and we get a surgeon to cut it off, and it grows on the other arm. And we get that removed and it grows on our hip. And the point is that the removing of the tumors is really an effect, removing an effect. And it can't have any effect on us until we change the belief system that's causing the tumor. Similarly, protesting war doesn't change war. Getting war out of your consciousness changes war. Being peace is Thich Nhat Hanh's book, not campaigning for peace or rioting for peace or beating people over the head with your peace sign for peace. His book is called Being Peace, because being peace is a change in consciousness which expresses as peace. So this is the cauldron of human consciousness. And this is the nature of Maya, in whatever term you want to call it. Joel calls it hypnotism or illusion. All of these are good words. It's just like being hypnotized. When you're hypnotized, you see something that's not there. It's just like when you go over the hill and look down into the desert and you see all the water on the road. Your mind's telling you it's water, and if you don't know any better, you might believe that it's water and call for somebody to come out and pump the highway. You could be paralyzed with being afraid to cross the desert because of all the water on the road, unless you know that it's just a reflection of the sun in the heat. It's hypnotism. It's an illusion. I particularly like the word Leelaa because it translates as the play of the gods playing, but for many of us it's not that playful, I guess. So what else can we say about human consciousness? The good news is that we can rise above well, first let me say that the thing which characterizes human consciousness is this belief in two powers. Or actually an infinite number of powers, powers of good and evil, and all the kinds of powers of germs, and powers of economic depressions, and powers of wars, and powers of this and that and the other, bullets and knives and slander, and you know. So the thing about human consciousness is that it believes in two powers and separateness from what is. But the point to realize is that beliefs do not have a power. There's no power in a belief unless you accept it. You can tell me that 2 times 2 is 5 until you're blue in the face, and until I accept that and start trying to balance my checkbook that way, it has absolutely no effect on my life. You know, it doesn't matter what lie you tell me. If I don't believe it, it will have no effect on my life at all. I always just laugh, and you know, when people tell me an unbelievable story, I don't feel obliged to challenge them on it. You know, I could care less if you lie to me. It has no effect on me. What do I care? You know, if you lie to me, it says nothing about me. And so lies have no power. So human belief has no power unless it's accepted. If I accept the lie that 2 times 2 is 5 or 2 plus 2 is 5, I've got a real problem in balancing my checkbook now. And they wind up in prison for creating money out of nothing. So there's no power in belief. The other thing is to remind you again that mind doesn't create, it merely forms. It merely forms the concepts that are being presented to it. So we have these forms that are the outpicturing of our concepts. By our, I mean the I that believes it's this human body, you know, that's associated with the human consciousness, that's looking through the human senses. That body's beliefs are outpicturing as disease and war and destitution and lack and loneliness and all these things. It's all outpicturing as that, but the fact is that the thing which is causing that has no power because it's just a lie that only appears to have power because I've bought it. And it also doesn't create any lack or disease or anything like that. It creates the image of it in the illusion that I'm looking at. It hypnotizes me into seeing the disease, the lack, the war, the what have you. Okay? It's all in the Maya. So there's no reality to the effect that I'm looking at, and there's no power in the cause of the content of my consciousness, which is producing that hypnosis. Joel uses the wonderful word that human consciousness or human belief is tempting us to believe in a power other than God, which will then manifest as what we call error or evil or what have you. But it's all an appearance in this bubble called mind. And the good news is that we can rise above human consciousness to where it no longer becomes, first of all, our primary source of input to our belief system, which manifests our experience. And, you know, we can rise to where it becomes a minor source of input, or we can rise to where it has no input at all. And this is the journey of rising to spiritual consciousness. And this is the reason for working on spiritual consciousness. And this is why we're all here tonight, so that we can all rise towards this. Spiritual consciousness is an alternate source of content for our consciousness for mind to manifest for us. One source of input for mind to manifest for me is human beliefs, which I may or may not let into my mind. Another source of input to my consciousness for mind to manifest for me in this human experience is spiritual consciousness, is alignment with God consciousness, is alignment with transcendental consciousness. And this is not so much getting new input as it is stopping getting the old input and stopping getting all the conditioned beliefs, stopping getting all the judgments that we're told to give up, stopping getting all of the conditioning. And when I disassociate myself from the human belief pool completely, then my mind is no longer conditioned, because it was the human belief radiating around here and being reflected around here and around itself that was conditioning me. So if I rise above human belief, I become unconditioned. And when I'm unconditioned, I can now see the creation that was expressed, the unconditioned creation, which was expressed in the unconditioned mind to begin with. So, and that, now I won't see that creation, because that creation, as we said before, is inconceivable, and it's outside of time and it's outside of space. And what I will see is a concept of that which is consistent with my having to get input that works with my five senses that I, in my asleepness, believe I am. But I will get concepts that are consistent with the nature of creation rather than consistent with the nature of the cesspool of evil beliefs that's floating around in human consciousness. Okay? You see? It's an alternate source, and it's really seeing what is. And it's in this sense that I meant that mind should be used as a tool of awareness. If we can uncondition our own mind, then it becomes a pure tool of awareness. And what's manifested for us is a 5 sense concept, but it's a 5 sense concept of immortality and harmony and perfection and bliss and things like that, rather than lack and limitation and things like that. So that's the goal in this work. That's what the work is about, what the whole story about is. In this human experience, the whole story is really about rising to spiritual consciousness. And all that's really happening here is not that we suddenly have started rising to spiritual consciousness. We've been doing that since we were an amoeba. But what we're doing now is working on becoming consciously aware of the fact that we're rising to spiritual consciousness. You know, we're the level of animal that is self-conscious, and now we're trying to arrive at the level of consciousness which is aware of the path that it is on for growth, because it goes faster once you see what's happening. You know, seeing it is a big step towards doing it. As long as we're totally ignorant and have no idea about this, then we continue to flounder, and we grow spiritually by eliminating everything that doesn't work, rather than growing spiritually by trying the thing that does. And the first is a much slower process than the second. My dear AA sponsor always used to say to me, "Well, don't worry, dear. They can believe that anything they want to be God. It won't work unless it is God." And that's the basic truth, you know. It's self-correcting. Anything that you believe that's God that isn't God won't work. And but trial and error is a slow process, and hearing the truth and pursuing it and finding out whether or not that's true in your experience is a much quicker approach. Believing this will not serve you at all. Makes no difference whether you believe it or not. I mean, it's either true whether you believe it or not, or it's a lie whether you believe it or not, so your belief has no effect on that at all. Believing 2 times 2 is 5 has absolutely no effect on 4 or 2. So don't believe it. Go within and find out whether it's true for you. And I'll give you a couple of hints. In the center of you is something which is the connection to the reality which you are. Let's look at 3 levels of self. There is, and this is my own conceptualization, if you will, but it works for me. There is the self, capital S, and if you prefer all capitals, maybe capital S-E-L-F, but certainly a capital S self, the self. And this self is the one consciousness, okay? Now the one consciousness has expressed itself individually as, in my case, myself. And I think of that as M-Y capital S-E-L-F. So it's myself. And then there's this human body-mind apparatus, which I think of as myself, small s, okay? So there are 3 levels. And right now, most of us are sitting here in myself, no caps. And if we go within, though, and feel what's going on, myself, cap S, will tell you. It's what Barbara calls the radar for truth. It will tell you whether something is true or not. If you go within and check, you will know whether something is worth pursuing. It will not necessarily give you the realization right now of the truth of it, but there's a radar within you, which is yourself, which is guiding you towards this transcendental consciousness, which will tell you whether that's right or not. You really know, if you are sensitive at all to this point, whether you're hearing truth or not. You know, I always know when I'm around an enlightened master. I always know when somebody's clear. There's just no doubt, you know, it says, whoa, there it is. And I always know. And I always know when somebody is speaking truth to me, you know, spiritual truth. Because this place knows, not the intellect, not anything I've been taught, not any conditioning, but this place down here knows truth when it hears it. So check that and see if it's true. And hear these words until you hear them. I mean, listen to them enough times that you hear them and see if they ring true for you. An amazing amount of conditioning contrary to this truth. The thing in its favor is that it's the consistent truth that's been taught by every mystic and true spiritual leader for the past 6,000 years. So they're all seeing something, and they're all seeing the same thing, whatever it is. So that's good news. How are we doing? My light went out, I can't see, but I think it's pretty close to it. Let's get quiet for a minute and see if there's anything that needs to be added to this. I think that's a package. Okay, that's as much as we're going to say, or that is going to be initiated from here about what is and what appears to be in the nature of mind and stuff like that. We're going to move on to the last 3 classes into rising to spiritual consciousness and other topics like that. So we won't readdress these topics except as they specifically apply to points, but there will be no review or general summary of this anymore or anything like that. So do listen to this again, and if you do have questions, do bring them, or talk to me individually, because this is foundational stuff. Because we're moving on from here. This is the hard part. This is the part that our minds won't accept for a long time, perhaps. And we'll talk about other things from now on. Okay, thanks for coming. I love you all. Pick up your CDs back there.